night they changed the locks, it was 19 degrees outside, and I was standing on the porch in a sweater that wasn't mine, holding a garbage bag with everything I apparently still owned. My mother watched me through the storm door. She didn't open it. She just looked at me the way you'd look at a stray that wandered into your yard, half pity and half disgust. And then she reached over and slid the deadbolt with this little click that I swear I can still hear when the house gets too quiet. My stepfather stood behind her in the warm yellow light of the kitchen with a beer in his hand, not even bothering to come to the door. And my younger sister, the golden one, the one who had never once in 29 years been told no, she peeked around the corner and gave me a little wave. A wave. Like I was leaving for college instead of being thrown out into a Minnesota January with nowhere to go. I should back up, because if I just start at the porch, you'll think I did something to deserve it. That's what everyone thinks. That's what they wanted everyone to think. My name is Cordelia, though nobody ever called me that except my grandmother, God rest her. To my family, I was just the help, before I was old enough to know that wasn't a normal nickname for a kid. I was 31 years old that winter. My mother had me young, with a man who left before I could walk, and then she married my stepfather when I was 6, and they had my sister 2 years after that. From the day my sister was born, I understood my role in the household with the kind of clarity a child shouldn't have. She was the daughter. I was the arrangement. When the dishwasher needed emptying, it was me. When my sister had a recital, the whole family went and I stayed home to watch the dog. When money was tight, and it was always tight in the way that families who refuse to be honest about money are always tight, somehow it was my paper route, my babysitting cash, my first real paycheck at 16, that quietly disappeared into the household to cover the gas bill, or my sister's dance shoes. I never saw a dime of it come back. I learned not to ask. I want to be fair, because the woman I am now tries to be fair, even when it costs me something. There were good moments. My mother braided my hair before school sometimes and hummed while she did it, and for those 10 minutes, I felt like maybe I belonged to her. My stepfather taught me to drive in the church parking lot and laughed when I stalled his truck, a real laugh, not a cruel one. I hold on to those because they're proof that I wasn't crazy, that there was a version of love available in that house. It just wasn't for me. It was rationed, and I was last in line always. The reason they threw me out, if you can call it a reason, was that I told the truth at the wrong dinner table. My sister's fiancé, a smooth-talking guy named Bradley who sold insurance and wore too much cologne, had been telling everyone he put a down payment on a house for the two of them. Big house, granite countertops, the whole dream. The family was over the moon. My mother had already started talking about Christmases there, and I knew because I worked at the credit union 3 towns over, and I am not in the habit of snooping. But I am also not blind, that the down payment was a lie. He'd actually taken out a personal loan in my sister's name without telling her, using her information to cover gambling debts. I'd seen the paperwork cross a colleague's desk. I didn't go looking. It found me. So I pulled my sister aside, just her, and I told her gently, the way you'd hand someone bad news you wish wasn't yours to give. I told her to check her credit. I told her I loved her and I didn't want her walking into a marriage on top of a hidden hole. She told her mother, but she didn't tell her the truth. She told her that I was jealous, that I'd always been jealous of her, that I was trying to ruin her happiness because I was 31 and alone and bitter, and that I'd made up a vicious story about Bradley to blow up the engagement. And my mother believed her. Of course she believed her. She'd been believing her for 29 years. That's the dinner where it happened. My stepfather stood up so fast his chair tipped over. He said I was poison. He said I'd been a burden since the day they took me in, which was a strange way to describe his own wife's child, but grief and rage rewrite history fast. My mother just kept saying, "How could you? How could you?" like I was the one who'd done something. Bradley sat there with his hands folded, looking wounded and noble, and my sister cried these big theatrical tears. And I realized in real time that there was no version of that night where I walked out whole. The story had already been written. I was just there to be cast as the villain in it. They told me to leave. I said it was 20 degrees out. My stepfather said I should have thought of that before I tried to destroy this family. And my mother, the woman who braided my hair, said nothing. She just looked at the floor. I packed a bag. I want you to understand I didn't beg. Some part of me, the part that had been kept last in line for 31 years, stood up very calm and very quiet inside the storm of it and said, "Okay, okay. If this is what I am to you, then I will go be it somewhere else." I drove to a motel off the interstate, the kind with a flickering vacancy sign and a clerk who didn't look up from his phone, and I paid $41 for a room that smelled like cigarettes and industrial carpet cleaner. I sat on the edge of the bed in my coat. I didn't cry. I think I was too far past crying. I just sat there listening to the heater rattle, and I thought, this is the bottom. There's nowhere lower than this. And there was a strange relief in it almost. When you've been falling your whole life, hitting the ground is almost a comfort. What none of them knew, what I hadn't told a single soul, was that I was already someone else by then, not on paper that they ever bothered to read. 4 years before that night, on my lunch breaks and at 2 in the morning and on every weekend my family didn't have a chore list for me, I had been building something. I had taught myself to code, badly at first and then less badly, off free courses and library books. I'd noticed at the credit union how many small businesses, the bakeries and the auto shops and the little daycares were drowning in the same handful of stupid paperwork problems. So I'd built a piece of software that solved exactly one of those problems and solved it beautifully. A scheduling and invoicing tool, plain and unglamorous, for businesses too small for the big expensive systems. I'd started selling it to a few shops in town, then a few dozen, then a regional chain found it. Then a venture firm in Minneapolis found me. I had kept it completely separate from my family, partly instinct, partly because every other good thing I'd ever brought home had been absorbed into the household and given to my sister. I didn't want this one touched. So I had a separate bank account they didn't know about, an LLC with a name that wasn't mine, and a quiet, growing thing that I never once mentioned across that dinner table. 2 weeks before they threw me out, that venture firm had made an offer to acquire the company, and the day after they threw me out, sitting in that motel room with the rattling heater, I signed it. I won't pretend it was a movie moment. It was an email and a video call with a lawyer I'd hired and a series of documents I e-signed on my cracked phone with the motel Wi-Fi cutting out twice. But when it cleared, when the wire actually landed, I sat there and looked at my banking app for a long, long time. The number was 46. $46 million after the lawyers and the taxes were accounted for in the structure we'd set up, for a woman whose own mother had let her stand in the cold the night before. I didn't feel triumphant. That's the thing nobody tells you. I felt hollow and very tired and weirdly calm, like the eye of a storm. I ordered a pizza to the motel and ate 3 slices and slept for 14 hours, the deepest sleep of my life, on a mattress that sagged in the middle. The phone call started about 10 days later, because here's how they found out, and I know people always wonder about this part, so I'll tell you plain. The acquisition was small enough that no national paper covered it, but the Minneapolis Business Journal ran a little profile, the kind they run on local founders, with a photo and everything. A woman from my mother's church saw it. She recognized my face even under a name they didn't know, and she called my mother all excited to say, "Isn't it wonderful, your daughter? Look what she did, she sold her company." I picture that phone call a lot. I picture my mother's face changing. The first call I let go to voicemail. Then there were 3. Then there were 11. By the end of that first day, there were 30-some, and within 72 hours, my phone showed 83 missed calls and a voicemail box so full it stopped accepting new ones. My mother, my stepfather, my sister. Numbers. I didn't recognize that turned out to be aunts and cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Even Bradley, somehow, who I'd never given my number to. I didn't answer a single one. I listened to a few of the voicemails, though, because I'm human and there's a part of you that needs to hear it. My mother's first one was crying, saying she'd been worried sick. Where was I? Why hadn't I called? Worried sick. 10 days after she watched me drive away into the dark and went back to her warm kitchen. The later ones dropped the worry and got to the point. We're family. Family forgives each other. We need to sit down and talk. There were misunderstandings on both sides. My stepfather left one that was almost a business pitch, talking about how with my good fortune, I could finally help the family get back on solid ground. How he'd always believed in me, which was a sentence so brazenly false I actually laughed alone in my new apartment. Because by then, I had a new apartment. A clean, bright, empty one-bedroom in St. Paul with big windows and absolutely nothing in it that had ever belonged to that house. I bought a bed and a chair and a coffee maker, and that was it for the first month. I'd sit in that chair in the morning with the light coming in and feel something I'd never felt in 31 years, which was that the space I was sitting in was entirely, unquestionably mine. Nobody could slide a deadbolt on me. Nobody could decide I was last in line. I cried then finally in that chair, that they were a different kind of tears. My sister was the one who found me first. She showed up at my work, the credit union, because that was the one fixed point in my life she knew. She came in on a Tuesday looking thinner than I remembered, with her engagement ring conspicuously gone from her hand, and she asked the teller for me by name, my real name, and when I came out to the lobby she started crying before I even reached her. I want to tell you I was cold. The truth is more complicated. I loved my sister. That's the cruelty of these things. You don't get to stop loving people just because they help throw you away. I took her into the break room and I got her a coffee and I sat across from her and I let her talk. She told me Bradley was gone. The loan had defaulted. Her credit was wrecked, exactly the way I'd tried to warn her about, and when she finally confronted him, he'd taken what cash he could and left, and it turned out there'd been another woman 2 towns over the whole time. So everything I'd said had been true. Every word. She knew it now. And then she said the thing I've been waiting 29 years to hear and dreading at the same time. She said, "I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. You were the only one who ever told me the truth." I believe she meant it. I still believe she meant it in that moment. But then she kept talking, and the conversation curved, the way water always finds the downhill path, and within 10 minutes, she was telling me about her debts, and how Mom and Dad were struggling too, the mortgage, Dad's truck, and how if I could just help a little, just to get everyone stable, we could be a family again, a real one this time. She said it like a gift she was offering me, the chance to buy my way back into the family that had cast me out. I sat there and I looked at my little sister, who I had loved, who had lied about me at a dinner table and gotten me thrown into the snow, and who was now, 3 months later, asking me to pay for the privilege of being treated like a person again. And I felt the strangest thing settle over me, not anger, clarity. I told her I would pay off the predatory loan, the one in her name, the one she'd been tricked into, not for the family, for her, the kid she'd been before all this, the one I used to read to. I'd handle that directly with the lender, in full, and she'd never have to think about Bradley's debt again. I told her I loved her and I meant it, and then I told her that was where it ended. I wasn't a bank. I wasn't an ATM with a face. I would not be funding the household that had decided I was disposable, and I would not be sitting at that table pretending the deadbolt never clicked. If she ever wanted a relationship with me, just me and her, 2 sisters, with no one's handout, the door was open. But the family as a unit, the machine that ran on my labor and my silence and my last place seat, that was done. She cried harder. She said I was being cruel. She said family sticks together. And I thought about my stepfather saying I was poison and my mother looking at the floor, and I said, "You're right. Family does stick together. That's exactly what I learned watching all of you stick together against me." She left. I paid off her loan that afternoon, every cent, and I never told her I'd done it the same day. I just did it and let the lender's letter be the one to tell her later. Some kindnesses are better unwitnessed. My mother and stepfather got a different answer, which is to say they got no answer at all for a long time. I want to be honest about the part that's hard to admit, which is that there was a stretch of weeks where I hated them with a heat that scared me. I would lie awake composing speeches. I'd imagine showing up at the house in a car worth more than the house and watching their faces. I'd imagine reading my stepfather's "I always believed in you" voicemail back to him word for word. The fantasies were detailed, and they were ugly, and they did not make me feel better. They made me feel like the house had followed me into my clean new apartment and was squatting in my chest. What pulled me out of it wasn't forgiveness. I want to be careful here because so many of these stories end with some glowing reconciliation, and I don't trust those endings. What pulled me out was understanding that revenge would have required me to keep them at the center of my life, and I had spent 31 years with them at the center of my life, and I was done. The most powerful thing I could do to people who needed to be needed was to no longer need them, and to no longer want anything from them at all, including their suffering. So I built instead. I took a good chunk of that money and I started a fund. Nothing flashy. It pays off predatory loans and medical debt for people in the small towns around where I grew up. Quietly, through a nonprofit so my name isn't on it. Single mothers, mostly. Kids who are working at 16 to cover the household gas bill and don't know yet that it's not supposed to be their job. I funded a real financial literacy program at 2 high schools, the kind of thing that might have let a younger me understand, years sooner, that the money disappearing into the house was not a normal way for a family to treat a child. I bought my grandmother's old house, the only person in that family who ever called me by my full name and meant it with love. It had been sold years ago. I tracked it down, paid well over its worth, and I live there now. I sit on her porch in the summer and I feel her there sometimes. She would have understood every choice I made. About a year after the locks were changed, a letter came, handwritten, my mother's careful Catholic school cursive. 2 pages. It said all the things, that she was sorry, that she'd been wrong, that she lay awake thinking about the cold that night, that she didn't expect money, she just wanted her daughter back, and could I please, please just call. I read it 3 times. I'm not made of stone, and I won't pretend the part of me that was 6 years old and getting her hair braided didn't ache to pick up the phone. But I noticed something reading it the 3rd time. There was a paragraph in the middle, tucked between the apologies, that mentioned how hard things were now, how Dad's hours had been cut, how they might lose the house. It was woven in so gently you could almost miss it. Almost. But I had spent my whole life learning to read what that family really meant underneath what they said, and I knew the shape of a hand reaching out when I saw one, even when it wore the glove of an apology. I didn't reply. I didn't shred it dramatically. I just put it in a drawer, in my grandmother's house, in a room full of light that belonged to me, and I closed the drawer and I went outside. The thing nobody tells you about being the one who got thrown out, the one kept last in line, the help, the burden, the arrangement, is that they were so busy treating you like you were nothing, that they never noticed you were learning how to survive without them. Every time they passed you over, they were teaching you that you didn't need their approval. Every chore, every disappeared paycheck, every recital you missed watching the dog, they were building someone who could stand in 19-degree cold and not break. They thought they were throwing out the trash. They had no idea they were setting me free. I don't talk to my mother. I send my sister a birthday card every year, just the 2 of us. And last fall she called and we talked for an hour about nothing, about a show she's watching. And there was not one single moment of anyone asking me for anything. And I hung up and sat in my grandmother's kitchen and thought, maybe someday just her and me. We'll see. But that house, that table, that deadbolt, I left it behind in the snow where they left me, and I have never once gone back to look for it. If you've ever been the one they decided was disposable, the one kept last in line in your own family, I want you to hear this from someone who lived it. The door they slammed on you was never your exit. It was theirs. Tell me your story down in the comments because I read everyone. And if any of this reached the part of you that's still standing on a cold porch waiting to be let back in, do yourself the kindest thing and subscribe. And stay a while with the rest of us who walked away and built something warmer. For a long time, I thought the cruelest part of that night was the cold, but it wasn't. It was how ordinary it was for them. My stepfather didn't shout some grand betrayal at me. He just decided I was a problem to be set out on the curb, and my mother just looked at the floor, and my sister just waved. Cruelty that casual only grows in a place where someone has been taught, over and over, that their worth is conditional. I was the help, the arrangement, the last one in line. And the truth I had to sit with in that motel room is that none of it happened by accident. Every disappeared paycheck, every recital I missed, every time my sister's lie was believed over my honesty was a small choice someone made, and choices stack up into a life. They built the version of our family that finally locked me out. I didn't cause that. I just stopped agreeing to live inside it. What saved me wasn't the money. The money came because of something quieter that started years before, on lunch breaks and at 2 in the morning when I chose to learn something hard instead of waiting for a family that was never going to choose me. That's the part I'd want a younger version of myself to hear. Strength isn't the absence of pain. It's what you build in the dark while everyone assumes you're breaking. They thought standing me in a blizzard would finish me. They had no idea I'd been quietly teaching myself how to stand for 4 winters already. But being able to walk away wasn't enough on its own. The harder thing was deciding what kind of person I'd be once I had the power they never expected me to get. I could have shown up in an expensive car just to watch their faces. I lay awake plotting exactly that. The wiser choice, the one that actually let me sleep, was understanding that real freedom meant no longer wanting anything from them at all, not even their suffering. So I paid off my sister's loan and told no one, and I put my name on nothing, and I let the consequences they'd planted catch up to them on their own. If you take one thing from Cordelia's story, let it be this. Guard your honesty even when lying would be easier and safer, because the truth I told at that dinner table cost me everything and was still the right thing to say. Keep learning something. Only you control. Some skill or strength no one can vote you out of, because that is the door no deadbolt can ever lock. And when life sets you out in the cold, let it harden you into someone steadier instead of someone bitter. The people who treat you like you're disposable are usually just showing you, early and for free, that you were always meant to build somewhere warmer than the house they kept you last in.